Hey, folks, we are back. This week, we are back with a new deep dive of unfinished business. I am your host, Jeff Galashaw, and with me, as always, is Andre Joseph. And this week, we are taking a look at 1995's Four Rooms. This one's a little different because it's an anthology. Four directors came together where basically this film takes place in a hotel with a bellboy across all the four interlocking stories and the different encounters he has with these different rooms. Originally, it was supposed to be 5 rooms with director Richard Linklater, but he dropped out of the project early. This one, the stories we have are The Missing Ingredient, the first story, directed by Allison Anders. The second one is The Wrong Man with Alexandre Rockwell as the writer-director. The third one is The Misbehavers with Robert Rodriguez. And the fourth, the most infamous, is The Man from Hollywood, starring and written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. Let me talk about my history with this film first. I saw this twice in theaters because I loved most of these directors. And, you know, of course, Quentin Tarantino fan. I love Allison Anders as a director. And Robert Rodriguez, at the time, I was still, you know, kind of a big fan of his. I know that they all came out of Sundance in the same year. That's why they maintained this friendship. And that is how the project came across. It's sort of like a Sundance, you know, a Sundance brat film. You know, Alexandre Rockwell was the person who came up with the original idea for this. I saw this at the Angelica twice. I will admit, the first time I saw it, full packed house. Second time I saw it, not as big, you know. But I was still faithful in my love of this film. First of all, it has a cool kind of loungy soundtrack by Combustible Edison, one of their only film scores they ever did. They are a band. Also, what I loved about this film is, like, even watching it again, this film is so 90s. You're like, most of this would not be made today. It's like the soundtrack, the direction, the fashion, you know, the actors you got together. I mean, this has a lot of, I'm not going to say stars, but it has a lot of well-known character actors in it. Let's see. The whole thing, one little fact, it was originally written for Steve. The Tim Roth role was originally written for Steve Buscemi, but he turned it down because he felt he had played this role before in a Jim Jarmusch film where he played Chet the bellboy. So that is how Tim Roth came into this film. This film's interesting with Tim Roth because he's never done physical comedy since. And there are a lot of scenes where he impresses me, but a lot of scenes where he comes off very strange as a character in general. I mean, my favorite scene with him, other than in The Misbehavers when he actually tries to talk while he's vomiting a projectile, is that he has, for the most of this film, he's cheery and has this kind of accent, you know, high British accent. But then when he's worn down later in the film, right before the fourth story, he now has this heavy Cockney accent. Like, I might have AIDS. And I'm just like, whoa, where'd this big jump in accents come? But I liked it as a character piece. Tell me your history with this film. And
there's not really much of a history because I didn't see it until you told me to watch it. But I remember when it used to be advertised on TV a lot because it really was, like you said, it was very 90s. It was at that point in time when, like, Miramax, and we're not going to mention the people involved with Miramax for obvious reasons, but it was like sort of like, let's take everybody that's involved in all the big hits, both behind the camera and in front of the camera, and let's just put them all into one movie that's made as an anthology film. And so, you know, I found personally that the Anders film was not great. It just, I love Ione Skye. I mean, I almost had a crush on her all over again watching her. She's just freaking gorgeous. And I think you even mentioned before, it was sort of her comeback after like a dry spell for a time. the second movie by Rockwell was also like a little annoying. David Proval being this crazy husband or boyfriend, whatever he was supposed to be doing. Jennifer Beals hostage, and it's probably like one of the few times you see Jennifer Beals do comedy. So that was kind of interesting, but not, something that I could really bear for a half hour. The Rodriguez one was my favorite out of all of them. I know that was like the basis for Spy Kids, so that I knew that going in, but I thought the kids were great. I love the humor in it, the back and forth with Tim Roth on the phone. Like, there's a dead body, and he's just like freaking the fuck out. And then when he vomits, when he finally does see the body in the room, the boy watching porno on TV. Like, I love that stuff. That stuff was like really hilarious and fun and just spontaneous, and even just Banderas's performance is sort of like this sort of I don't know, inept dad, and you got the chick from Karate Kid Part 2 as the wife, which is like sort of like yeah, that's like totally out of the box casting. Very nice lady, by the way. I've tweeted her a few times.
Oh, okay.
The Tarantino one I thought was a bit self-indulgent. If you had done it without Tarantino acting in it, I think it would have been a better movie than just him doing his spiel like he always does. And then getting all his, he didn't really have all his friends involved with it, but having Bruce Willis in there basically playing Bruce Willis, with like everybody kissing his ass before he got lazy. I had some moments there, but like I said, the Rodriguez one was my favorite. And Tim Roth, I think, carries it pretty well for somebody that's more of a serious actor than a comedic actor. It's uneven, but I like when it gets to the second half.
Okay, well, here's what I like about the film. It has to be in the order it goes through, because you can't mix and match the films, because there's a momentum that goes into each room. So it's like his character is taking what happened in the previous room with him to the next one.
Right.
So that is why that's one of the reasons I appreciate it, even though I agree the second half is probably better than the first half. Because it kind of, it's more for character, but it builds his frustration throughout, And so that by the time we get to the third story, which is where the worst happens to him, once he's to the fourth one, he's like, I'm done. And that's the attitude he takes into it. Whereas in the first story, he's so cheery. I'm going to go through each room or each story to talk about it in full. And so, The Missing Ingredient by Allison Anders. I think the big get in this film is that Madonna was in it, playing, a supporting role. And I mean, no offense, I love Allison Anders. I love all of her films. I could kind of see she was maybe going for a screwball kind of more comedy that involved witchcraft. And it's the only time any kind of supernatural thing is brought up. Though I will tell an interesting story after about the original ending. But this film, it seems like it's supposed to be about feminism, but it comes across like an adult film, like all the actresses are topless at some point in this movie. And, the whole point is they need to get sperm from Tim Roth. Okay. And, it's like, really? This is the plot? And it's interesting that it was a female director who came up with this.
It was the 90s.
Exactly. I mean, maybe she was trying to show, hey, I have a sense of humor. I'm like the boys, but it was just strange. I applaud her for the cast she got. I just wish it was a stronger story overall to get all these people involved. I'm trying to think anything else about this story in particular. Not really,
Just Ion Sky.
Yes, we get it. You like Ion Sky. I like Sammy Davis. This was like the biggest thing she did up till then, other than a TV movie. And Alicia Witt is in it. An actor I like.
Doesn't get enough work lately.
And, she is the only one. She appears kind of topless, but she at least gets taped X's across hers. Yeah. And she is Madonna's girlfriend in the film. Funny enough, it's like, okay. It's that type of film where it's like, okay. Next, we have The Wrong Man, directed by Alexandre Rockwell, who was married to Jennifer Beals at the time, and had cast her in his first film, In the Soup, which also had Steve Buscemi and Seymour Cassel. It's an interesting film, but this is, I'm going to say, one of the more artistic rooms we see throughout this whole film. Because, you know, in this room, it's basically an arguing couple playing some weird S&M game that we never get the rules of. So we're like Ted, the character, just brought into this and like not exactly sure what's going on. It is nice to see Jennifer Beals play comedy because she's always played serious in other films. She looks gorgeous in this. And
I will gorgeous in everything she does.
That's true, but I mean, she has a nice flowing dress. She looks classy, even though she has a gutter mouth in the movie. But I can see the intoxicating and also the older male, younger female. There is one aspect that makes this part of the story worthwhile. I could see it actually happening, but it also brings David Proval up a notch, you know, because previously I'd seen him in bit roles. This was before I saw movies like Mean Streets with him in it. But, you know, up till then, I was seeing him play, the electrician with a wisp in the Brady Bunch movie. Mm-hmm. And this actually gave him dramatic depth. And interestingly enough, he was actually a replacement for Alec Baldwin. And so, you know, and then this led to like things like being on The Sopranos and playing, you know, more substantial roles in bigger projects. So I give it that for that. But, I mean, again, we're getting from a little bit of a lower quality in the first story to at least this one's a little bit better. I will admit, I, like you at first, struggled with this 30 minutes. Like, where is this going? Mm-hmm. You know? And then, you know, the punchline that, he was, another guy was supposed to be doing this. And, you know, Ted just happened to be run into there. Even though it's weird considering he's the bellboy, so they must have ordered something. I believe it was ice. And the next one is everybody's favorite, the Misbehavers. See, this set up the idea for Spy Kids, which has been, you know, lucrative for Robert Rodriguez. But this, I'm going to be bold and say, I think this is his best work out of all his career. This is my favorite thing he's ever done. Because what works here is it is a kid's film, but it's a kid's film for adults. Yeah. So you have that kind of cartoonish, but you have so much dark stuff in here that it just works. This is where Tim Roth, again, is at his most anime. He's vomiting while he's talking. He keeps smacking the cigarette out of the boy's mouth every time he puts one in. You have porn on the TV. You have a dead woman in a mattress. And it's just like, who thinks of any of this?
And then the place goes on fire, and it's like, oh, you know, were they misbehaving?
And the interesting thing is, he filmed this a week after wrapping Desperado.
Oh.
So he came up with this concept, filmed it, and even got Antonio Banderas, which, you know, considering Robert Rodriguez, wasn't that hard, but did this all in like a week. So that makes it even all the more impressive. So like I said, if anything, this is the room to see this movie for. And, you know, I know in today's YouTube, you can just go probably watch it on YouTube just for the scene. But I would say watch the film because it's like the payoff finally in this movie. And then we have To the Man from Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. Now, this one's a little trickier because, okay, for instance, you said if he didn't star in it, can you think of any actor who you would have cast in 1995 terms, not like modern terms, to
Steve
play
Buscemi.
that role? Who?
Steve Buscemi.
I could see that, but I think you'd really need somebody more of a marquee star. I'm not going to say Bruce Willis. So I don't know who I would, but somebody who kind of has a way with words and a huge ego. Christopher Walken's too old, but he would have been not. I'm shocked he didn't go to his buddy John Travolta.
Yeah, Travolta would have been good there.
Exactly. This would have been better than White Man's Burden for him.
Dive on that one day.
Exactly. Less said about that film, the better. Maybe but what is interesting is he basically remakes a story from an Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode called The Man from the South or The Man from Rio or Reno. which is also a Roald Dahl short story originally. And all his hallmarks are here. You know, you have the the long single take in the beginning. You have Jennifer Beals making another appearance. You have Bruce Willis uncredited. This was around the time I believe that he was breaking up with Demi Moore. So when he's having this argument with his wife on the phone, it's not like, did they kind of write that in? I'm not going to sit here and say Bruce gives a stellar performance, but it's notable that he's there and he has lines. But again, like I said, it's so self-indulgent because Quentin's making sure, like, I'm talking the most. I'm doing everything. I'm doing the movie references. Tim Roth really gets to sit here and just react more than anything. And it's the only time the movie's not over the top with him in a performance. So I appreciate it for that. And also right before this, there is a little intersectional where Marissa Tomei makes an appearance. And Kathy Griffin, who is in the beginning of the film, makes an appearance and has to convince him to go to this final room. And the one thing that is different from the Alfred Hitchcock Presents is the ending of this scene. And I'm not going to ruin it. I know I ruin a lot of things, but this one, you guys are going to have to watch to see the ending. But I will talk about the original ending of the film. Originally, after what happens, Jennifer Beals is supposed to walk into the elevator, and that goddess they raised from the first story is supposed to be there. So again, wrap around. But they didn't do that. I don't know why. But the only reason I know this is because it's another subject I'd like to bring up about this film. Do you remember in the 90s, especially when it came to Miramax movies after Pulp Fiction, but you could go to bookstores and get the original scripts of these movies?
Yes.
Because I miss that, because I bought, as soon as I saw the movie, I remember Shakespeare and Company in the Village, and I went and bought the script for that. And I really miss that because you don't really have too many Shakespeare and Companies around. And they sold scripts for even indie movies back then. And now, unless it's really a big project or you get it as an extra in a foreign magazine, you really don't get the screenplays in book forms unless you go online and download them yourself. And I miss that, We still have, like, plays where you can easily buy the scripts. Why can't we get, like, certain screenplays that same way? I just feel like that's another lost art from the 90s that unfortunately didn't continue. Because I feel like, of course, obviously, if you're a film fan, go to film school, you know the sites to go to read scripts to learn writing. But what about the person who's maybe not as savvy? You could go to a Barnes & Noble, sit there and read it instead of having to go home, download it to whatever, and then read it, on a screen. So I feel like that's also a lost art.
Definitely.
I know it's not the best, but I really like this film because it's sort of like those old albums from the 70s where it was like a collaboration of this artist, this artist, this artist. And it wasn't about financial gain. You just really wanted to support one another. And this, unfortunately, is one of the last films like that. I mean, over the years, out of Sundance, we've seen like anthology films where a bunch of directors get together. But this was like when everybody who directed that film was at the top of their game, at the peak of their careers, and they came together and made this film. And, I understand it's like an uneven movie, but, I kind of miss that, It's sort of like something from, like, a movie from the 70s, even though it was made in the 90s. It just feels like this is a lost artifact that we're not really going to see too much of in the future.
Or even just something like this where you have like multiple different good directors getting together and taking the same characters and doing different stories with them. That's something I always wanted to do with some of my filmmaker friends and never got a chance to do it. I feel like now, like you said, it's not just a lost art, but I think the business is so complicated now with all the blockbusters and trying to do more tentpoles. Nobody's taking chances on anything experimental. The closest we ever got, I think, was when Tarantino and Rodriguez did Grindhouse, where it was, let's do the whole 70s drive-in feel with some gory exploitation flicks and kind of put them together as a one deal package. It didn't work, but at least they tried that experiment, much like they did with Four Rooms, and they haven't done anything like that since then that I could think of personally.
No, it's more like behind the scenes. Maybe they'll help each other on their
Yeah,
individual projects. Like, oh, I'll do a score for you, or I'll do a song, or hey, I'll do this scene for you. But nothing where it's like, hey, let's join and make a movie together. You know, sort of like how they did with kind of like From Dusk Till Dawn, where Tarantino wrote the script and obviously co-stars and produces, but you know, he doesn't in a filmmaking capacity. That's as far as he goes.
right.
You know, he's not like in charge of it. It's all Rodriguez directing, and that's also another one of Rodriguez's better films, because I sometimes think Rodriguez works best with other people's scripts.
Mhm.
Not, I mean, he's not a horrible writer, but I think he's more of a visual artist than, you know, a writer. And so, I mean, he has good ideas. Like, again, the first Spy Kids, it's serviceable. And, you know, the sequels, we get a little more outlandish. And I understand he's a family man, so he more wanted to make films for his kids, you know, necessarily than, oh, let me make another From Dusk Till Dawn. And I mean, he went full studio route with Battle Angel Attila. And so, you know, and that was kind of a hit. So I'm like, he's a decent filmmaker. I just always feel like he's at his best the dirtier he is with his movies.
Right.
Like,
and he has little to work with.
Yeah, you know, it's like he's better at. It seems like he also has more of an excitement when it comes to more stuff that would be termed exploitation, but trying to make it mainstream. It's sort of like how Machete works. Machete 2 is a little too much, you know. And so, any last thoughts on Four Rooms?
No, I prefer, actually, if I have to rate it, the Tarantino one for me is number one. Number two would be, actually, no, I'm sorry. Rodriguez number one, Tarantino number two, Anders would be number three, and number four would be the Rockwell one.
Interesting. I would say Robert Rodriguez number one. Then, of course, Quentin Tarantino. Then I'm shockingly going to say, even though I like her better as a filmmaker, I'm going to say Alexandre Rockwell the third and Allison Anders the fourth. And even though Allison Anders did give us nudity, you know, so I appreciate that. Also, another lost art in films. And who would have thought, like, out of all three male directors, she's the only one that had nudity in her story. And this was back when Quentin Tarantino was still working with producer Lawrence Bender, too. Because he also has a cameo in this, as the guy who throws up that almost hits Tim Roth. Overall, I think it was a project where it was, like, there was an effort there. It might not have all come together the way they expected it, but I appreciate the effort. And, you know, as long as you put great effort into something, somebody's going to enjoy it. And, you know, I felt like this was worth it.
Yeah.
And I also take it as a lost artifact of the 90s. An underrated film I think more people should see. I'm not going to say you're going to love it, but it's worth just taking a look at, because you're not going to see anything like it probably these days ever again. So that is my final word on it. Sorry, this was more informative and less comedic, but hey, we talked about nudity. So I hope you guys liked it. But as always, we have more unfinished business, but this wraps up this business for this week. Andre Joseph, is there anything you'd like to promote, plug before we go?
Yeah, if we're still doing this. So I have my new short film that I'm doing next month called Dismissal Time. It's a dramatic short film loosely based on incident that I went through when I was in high school. And it's kind of tackling a lot of the racial social justice conversation we're having in the country right now. And it's a really good project that I got a lot of really talented actors involved with. So we're raising money right now through my fiscal sponsor, Fractured Atlas. You can find out more about the project and see my pitch video over on our Facebook page for Dismissal Time. And please support. And even if you can't donate, just share the link.
Yes, and all that information will be in the show notes. And I have to ask you, fair people, have you seen the movie Malice with Alec Baldwin and Nicole Kidman? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. What's your fucking awesome movie of the week, Andre?
Have you seen the movie Blood Red Sky? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome.
I have not yet, so this will be interesting. And obviously, I say give Four Rooms a try. That's why we're talking about it. But trust me, there will be plenty of films in the future where we're like, yeah, we deep dive. Don't. You know? So that ends the business this week. There's always future business, and we'll see you next time.